Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again for joining our PowerTips live series. This is week 5, and I'm your host, Jawahar. I'm the innovation lead at Legrand's Data, Power, and Control Division. I'm today joined by my co-host, and fun co-host, I should say, Joel Bryan, who's the head of tech support at Legrand Data, Power, and Control. So wanted to set the stage a little bit, and I did see some of the messages on chat where people were wondering if we were supposed to hear us talk early on. It's just the platform has a little bit of issue, so you were able to see us but not hear us until the broadcast started. So we just started, so you haven't missed anything. So again, this is a 5-part series. Last of that is today, and Joel Bryan will make the announcement towards the end as to how this is going to continue. And so today's topic is a very interesting one. This is the point. Generally, I turn it over to Joel to introduce it, but I wanted to give a quick overview of the background behind today's topic. Basically, we were wondering how we can utilize the features that we have. Right. One of the features that we have always had is the power factor measurement. So we were debating what would it tell us if you track power factor, and if you see a change, can that tell us something? And so we had this hypothesis that if you see a dip in power factor, then that perhaps tells you that there's something wrong with the power supply itself. So it could call your attention to it. And that was the genesis behind this today's topic. And so Joel will explain a little bit more about what we're going to cover today, and then I'll come back and do some more explanations on the actual details of it. So Joel?
Okay, great. Thank you, Jawahar. And as you said, my name is Joel Bryan, and I'm the Global Director for Post-Sales Documentation and Services here at Legrand for the Raritan and the ServerTech brands. And in today's session, session 5, we're going to look into how you can potentially identify trouble spots within your data center. And as Jawahar said, originally we were looking at how do we can we use our power factor monitoring to do this. However, it has to be tied to another aspect to really give you some valuable data so that false positives won't get triggered. And it's along with power factoring, there's also another level that needs to be added. And Jawahar, can you tell us what that other layer or process that it is that we would need to do to make sure that we're adding value with some of these alerts?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's give a little bit overview of power factor itself, right? So if you have a Raritan PDU with outlet level monitoring and metering, you would have seen this variable called PF, or power factor, show up as one of the metrics that we measure. So if you see the trend of it, which you can see on the PDU interface, and Duncan will walk you through in the live demo section, you'll generally see it as being stable. So when you get a server, you're familiar with these 85 plus rating or 90 plus rating, where it simply means most of the power that's coming into the power supply is actually being consumed and utilized for proper work rather than sent back to the utility. So it's normal to see a 0.9 or a 0.95 kind of number for power factor. So if you see a dip in it to, let's say, 0.6 or 0.5, that could mean something. So that's how we wanted to first show you how to do it, how to look out for it. So as you may remember, any numeric value that we track within the PDU, you can set a threshold, and based on the threshold, if it gets violated, you can trigger alerts. So in this case, you can set a threshold for power factor to be, let's say, 0.6, and if it goes below that, then you can get an alert. So we tried this. The problem with this is, even though it sounds great that it could predict something that's going to happen, uh, the power factor dips for not just one reason, which is not just the power supply has some problems, but also if the power consumption itself is below, like, let's say 75 watts, if it's very low. So if your server is idling, it's still gonna, the power consumption, your active power, is gonna dip to less than 75 watts. And that time, your power supply's power factor correction circuit is not gonna kick in, and it's not gonna compensate for it. So the power factor will tend to go lower, could even go to 0.5 or even lower in some cases. So that's the issue, right? If it was as simple as setting an alert and forgetting about it, then life is good. But in this case, it's not only checking the power factor number, but also the active power number. So you need to check two conditions. So there's no easy way to do it right on the interface itself. So if you remember our events engine that Duncan showed us last couple of sessions, it doesn't say check two conditions before triggering an alert. It's just not part of the interface. So that's where we need to introduce yet another concept to you that we have, again, always had it as part of the PX family, but we've never really talked about it much. It's called Lua scripting. So Lua scripting is buried into the interface, and it lets you create things within the PDU, like features that you want to do that's not part of the standard PDU offering. So in this case, you can create a script that will check power factor first and also the active power value. And only if both conditions are met, say the power factor goes below 0.6 and your active power consumption is higher than 75 watts, then go ahead and trigger the actions that you want to see, whether it's an SNMP alert or an SMTP email. So that's the construct. So that's what we're going to show today as to how to do it with this Lua scripting. And this Lua scripting, when Duncan goes through it, you'll see it's pretty simple in the syntax, but you just need to be introduced to it, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. So Lua scripting, because we can do something natively on the interface, and power factor, that's going to show you when things change and where you may need to take action. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Javi. Thanks for the explanation. Very clear. Thank you. And as you mentioned, this feature in terms of power factor has been around for a while, and it's only available on our outlet metered PDUs. So that's our 4K and our 5K series. And walking us through today's session, as previous sessions, will be Duncan Gwynn, who is our post-sales product specialist as part of our technical support organization. And following the walkthrough, we will open up for questions as we typically do. And however, during the session, if you have questions that comes to you, feel free to post those questions, and we could always read them after Duncan is finished and we've opened up the meeting to have that conversation. Additionally, if you have other issues that are pressing outside of what we're showing today, it's always best to email us at tech@raritan.com, or if you'd like to talk to a live person, give us a call at our 800 number, and we'll certainly be there to help you try and resolve any issues that you may have. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Duncan, and Duncan is going to take us through power factoring and then piggyback that with the Lua scripting to show you how to really get the information that's necessary to trigger you to take some action in certain areas of your data center. Okay, so with that, Duncan, I'm going to pass the ball over to you.
All right, thanks, Joel. Jawahar, I think you stole all my lines, man. So I'm just going to repeat everything that you said. So first step, I'm going to log into the PDU with the admin credentials. And And of course, this brings us to our dashboard. And as we touched on, what we're going through today with power factor at the outlet level, of course, that's only going to be available on our 4K and 5K products that have outlet level metering. Power factor is still an available sensor on a 1K, 2K unit that has inlet level metering. You're just not going to be able to get that granular data at the outlet level. So if we go into our outlets menu on the left-hand side, can pick an outlet. So I'm going to pick outlet 6 here. And we can see our various sensors. So we see our RMS current voltage. And then down here, we get into active power, apparent power, and power factor. So this power factor is a ratio of the apparent power to the active power. You can see, and we're at about 87% on this particular outlet. And down below, we can see some trending, so we can select what sensors we want to see a trend chart for. So we can look at power factor and see that it's been pretty stable. There's no massive dips in this particular outlet. If we go into thresholds, this is where we would be able to adjust this power factor threshold and set a lower critical or a lower warning. But as Jawahar mentioned, if we set this, how they're currently set, where below 75% or 65%, we have the potential to get a lot of false alarms and notifications, because once your power supply of your server is in an idle state and it's not consuming 75 watts of power, some feedback that we've learned over support cases through the years and through engineering research is they're not required to use that power factor correction circuit when you're below that level of consumption. So your power factor is going to dip down when you get below a certain point of consumption, and therefore you're probably going to cross this threshold at some point if your servers aren't doing work. So in order to get real meaningful data out of this, we need to be able to also make sure that if we want an alert, that we are consuming more than 75 watts of power. And of course, the goal with power factor is to be as close to 1 as possible, and that's what that power factor correction circuit's going to do. It's going to try to get that as close to 1 as it can. So that's how we set a threshold in the PDU, which we've gone over in a few of these webinars at this point now. So those are already defined. I'm not going to make any changes to it, but as Joel and Jawahar both have mentioned, we're going to look at what's called a Lua script. So Lua is a programming language, and we have a built-in interface for you to load in scripts to add features to a PDU that aren't readily available in the interface. So I've already loaded this one in called Power Factor Monitor. So we worked with our development team in Germany, and they helped us with this script. And you can see here, it's pretty well laid out. And there's some notes in here. So it tells us what the script does. It's going to monitor the active power and the power factor per outlet, and it generates an event once the active power is above, or the active power is above a certain threshold and the power factor is below. So right now I have our power factor threshold set at 89, so 89%, 0.89. And my active power threshold is 75. So as long as I'm above 75 watts on an outlet, if I cross below that 89% mark, it's going to log an event log action. So I'll demonstrate that. But our pole interval is 60 seconds. So in reality, I mean, if you have a power supply that has, gone into, a failed state, if you will, where maybe the power factor correction circuit's been compromised and it's no longer, no longer capable of having a nice power factor, it's probably going to stay that way. So you can, adjust this polling interval to whatever you need in seconds. So I'm just going to leave it at 60 for now, but it's not something that you have to measure every second like our other sensors do. So you can adjust that. And there's a whole lot of other items in here, but the short story is that it's going to log a message that tells us there's a power factor warning. So it's going to tell us what outlet that warning's on and what the measurements are. So since I haven't made any changes to the script, I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel.
So Duncan, real quick, is this for all outlets?
Yes, this is for all outlets on the PDU. So we'll see that once I run the script, we're going to see that it's going to begin pulling every outlet. So it's got 30 outlets on this particular model. So it's pulled them once. The next pulling interval is going to be in 60 seconds. So this is the debug output. So it's going to do this constantly, and it's going to just continue to log all this stuff, but it's only going to show up in the event log if it meets those parameters that we've defined in the script. So if I go to maintenance and look at the event log, I've run this quite a few times already, so you probably see quite a few events in here, but our very top line. So we have a power factor warning on outlet 6, where our power factor is at roughly 87%, and our active power is above 75 watts. So we're at about 78. So it has successfully logged that event. And one thing that I want to note is we, in this Lua script, we chose to use a system event log message just to give you something quick that we could show you. But if we look at the script, we can modify this and use a different system action. So, an SMTP alert or SNMP trap, those could be triggered as well. So obviously, you have to know a little bit of scripting to get to that point, but it is possible to use a different notification method. So that is Lua scripting in a nutshell. And as Jawahar also mentioned, the reason that we have to do this is because when we create an event rule, we have our actions listed below. When we create an event rule, we can't say that I want to monitor PDU outlet, and I can say outlet 6. But when I define my sensors, I have to choose what I want. And I have those thresholds preset in the PDU, but I can't do a logical and. So I don't have that level of logic in the event engine here. So using the scripting, the Lua script, I can actually input that logic to be whatever I want. In our case, it's going to be an and. So if power factor is below and active power is above. So that is it. Lua scripts are a very powerful tool. They use our API. There's a lot that can be done with them. In terms of how you can get Lua scripts onto your PDUs, you can obviously code directly into this interface, but we're also talking about bulk rollout. So at this time, the main method of doing that would be USB stick, where you can actually load the Lua script onto a USB stick and then plug that into the controller of the PDU and load the script that way. So there are some other methods. DHCP, TFTP is another one that's a possibility. It requires a little bit more work to execute, but it can be done that way as well. And then it's also there's some API calls that can be done to push Lua that way. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Joel and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Okay, great. Thank you, Duncan. Hey, Javi, I don't know if you had, as Duncan was walking through, if you had additional questions on that or anything you wanted to add before I unmute everybody and give an opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah, I don't see any questions right now, so we can go ahead and unmute the lines. But in the meantime, while you're doing it, I have a question for Duncan. So or actually a point that I wanted to clarify. So this is the first time we're introducing Lua script in any format other than our documentation. So I wanted to take a moment to just make a key observation here. When you think of scripting in general, you think of one central server that has a whole bunch of scripts that will go ahead and execute it against multiple targets, like multiple PDUs in this case. That's what we generally talk about when we think of scripting. Whereas Lua scripting that we are talking about is slightly different. The kernel is in the PDU itself. So the PDU has an engine to run a script. So whatever script you create resides within that PDU that you created in, and it executes in that PDU alone. So you don't need a third-party server or any other system to run these things. So you can create a script in a PDU, run it in the PDU, and it does things for you. But it's, again, isolated to that PDU. And that's why Duncan was talking about how do you now take this to all your PDUs? And those are the methods that he mentioned. One thing that I would also mention is to make sure if you're going to try this on one PDU first, get all the parameters right, because we don't know what the power factor is for your servers and your power supplies. So you may want to check the historical data and put the right value in. And it's going to take a little bit of a trial and error to get a good solid rules set up so it can be copied over to your entire setup. And feel free to work with us and give us some feedback as to how this goes. So that's
okay. Great. Thanks, Javi. And I did unmute everybody. If you'd like to ask the questions live, you could definitely make sure that you unmute your device so you could speak to us. Do we have any questions in the chat, Javi?
Yeah, so I have the first one. Can this be adapted to monitor a single outlet on the PDU?
Yes, it can. So, in our case, we're monitoring all outlets, but I lost my mouse for a second. So just to kind of show you here, if I hit create new script, we have some built-in examples in the PDU. So believe that if I load the outlet state, there's one of the examples on here that specifically shows, how to view a specific outlet. Here it is. So this one's looking at outlet 3 specifically. So the syntax is going to be different, but yes, it's possible to adapt the script to monitor just one outlet.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Duncan.
That's a good question. And here's another one. Where can we find the documentation on Lua?
So there is some documentation, on our, we have a help page for our API. There's some information there. As far as documentation in the Lua language itself, I believe it's lua.org. I don't know the specific website, but there, Lua is an organization. You can go there and find all their documentation in terms of the syntax and how the language is structured. So I'm not sure what that specific question was geared around. If it was geared around our PDU Lua or just the language in general, but there's a couple places where you could find that. Yeah, and also, we have some in our SDK, we have some information there as well. If you download the SDK from our support page, I can show you where that is. So raritan.com/support. Blazing fast internet right now.
Are your kids on Minecraft too?
I don't know. Maybe watching a Netflix movie or something, who knows. So if we go into PX3 IPDUs, and then under the JSON RPC bindings, you can download our SDK, which will download a zip file for you. And within this zip file, you'll find, Python bindings, Perl, some Java stuff, and then you'll also see Lua, and that'll load eventually, and I'll show that to you. But yeah, there are a few different places where you can find documentation.
Okay, Great, great.
Okay, so we have one more question. I think this is a very, very good question, and it'll give us a chance to clarify something too. So the question is, sorry, I missed the first part. If active power is less than 75 watts and power factor is lower than 0.65, does it mean there is something wrong with the PDU? Okay, a couple of things that we need to clarify. First thing, the power factor that we are talking about is for the outlet, which by definition means the power factor of the power supply that's in your server. So let's say we are monitoring outlet 3 power factor. That would mean whatever is plugged into outlet 3, it has a power factor of 0.9 or 0.8. So if it happens to be a server, then it's power supply. Right? So the power supplies are rated for 85 plus or 90 plus by Energy Star, which simply means these power supplies are expected to be efficient and they are expected to consume most of the power that's provided to them, meaning 95% of it or 85% of it. That's what the manufacturer guarantees. Now, what they don't guarantee is if that same power supply is only consuming 75 watts or less. So basically the way it works is the power supplies have a circuitry called power factor correction circuitry. So these things will kick in only when the power consumption is higher than something that's considered reasonable. That reasonable one value is 75 watts. So if the server is idling and the power supply is only consuming less than 75 watts, then that circuitry in the power supply is not even going to trigger. It's not going to do anything because the consumption is so low that they don't even bother doing it. So to rephrase the to bring it back to what we were talking about, what we are saying is, so let's make sure you don't go into the false positive, right? Anytime your power supply consumes less than 75, you're going to have a lower power factor. So we don't want that. So we want to get your attention only when the power factor is lower and also your servers are not idling. So that will mean the rule has to be that the active power is higher than 75 watts and the power factor is lower than whatever was certified. If you have 85 plus, then you would set the threshold to be lower than 85. Right? So that'll be your bracket, if you will, to catch just that event. The second thing I want to clarify is, so let's say it's true. The consumption is higher than 75 and the power factor is less than 85. What does that mean? Does it mean the power supply is failing? Does it mean it's bad, or has it failed? We don't know. We can't say for sure, but we just wanted to bring it to your attention because things were fine and then suddenly there's a dip, and it's not because your server went to idle. So what is happening with that power supply? You may want to take notice to it. You can take that data and take it to your facilities team. They may be able to help you explain what may be happening. But what all we wanted to do is bring something to your attention. There is an anomaly and we want you to know it. So the safest thing you may want to do, like Duncan said earlier, is if you have a spare power supply, you just swap it out and then do some testing on the side so that your production can continue if you can hard swap it. Okay.
Okay,
so
great. Thank you, Javi. Thank you for the explanation. Okay. How do we look? Do we have any more questions?
Nope, I think that's about it.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, with that, we would definitely like to talk about what's next for these series. So we did these weekly and focusing on certain topics, specific topics, and it's yielded some really good results with our customers, gave us a chance to connect with some of our end users. So we are definitely going to continue this. However, our cadence is going to shift from weekly to monthly. And again, for both brands, the Raritan brand and the ServerTech brands. And just as with this series, we will add notification on LinkedIn, and we'll also send out an email reminder for anybody interested in any of the topics that we have coming up on a monthly basis. It'll be similar format, give you a chance to ask questions live as we go through some of these walkthroughs. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Javi.
I think that's about it. And just wanted to thank everybody as well. Thanks for joining, and thanks for being with us through this journey.
Yes, yes. Thank you all. And thank you, Duncan, for helping us walk through. And we'll continue this on a monthly basis, and we should get some notifications. Okay? Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.